This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidu. It's Thursday, January 30th. This is Africa 54. As suspected cases of the coronavirus expands, more airlines are suspending flights to China. Africa 54 takes a closer look at the Kenyan government's fight against corruption and al-Shabaab-driven terrorist attacks. And we'll tell you about the link between bats and Madagascan coffee. As the death toll from the coronavirus jumped to at least 132, U.S.-based pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson says it is working on developing a vaccine to stop the outbreak that has infected thousands in China. The company says the vaccine program would utilize the same technologies used to make its experimental Ebola vaccine, which is currently being administered in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. The company also says it is donating an HIV drug to China to use for research to find a solution against the disease. Meanwhile, the United States and Japan evacuated their nationals from the quarantined city of Wuhan Wednesday. British Airways has joined the list of air carriers suspending flights to mainland China. 110 Americans evacuated from Wuhan landed on Wednesday at a military base in California. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Chris Braden says it may take 3 days to determine whether they are sick.
Some of that evaluation is actually taking some tests and flying those samples to CDC in Atlanta, doing the tests and getting the results back. We're going to be monitoring them twice a day with symptoms and fever checks. At the end of 3 days, we think we'll have enough information to know their status and their risk.
Many Americans remain in Wuhan. Ningxi Xu, a machine learning engineer from New York, had traveled to spend the Lunar New Year holiday with her family.
I think people are scared because there's almost no mobility. There are no buses, no subway, no trains, ferries, even taxis. And I think private vehicle use is limited. The streets are almost empty. We went out a few times. We saw maybe like 10 people. So it's just, and everyone's wearing a mask, of course. So it feels like a ghost town.
She was due back home on January 28th, but has been unable to leave China. She now awaits updates from the State Department about evacuation flights.
In the original email, it said there might be extremely limited capacity on this one flight because there's 1,000 of us, but only maybe a couple hundred could get on the plane. And it said if there's more interest than they were able to accommodate, then priority will be given to those with higher risk for coronavirus. But that's pretty much the only criterion they set. So it's not really clear to me how they determined who's at higher risk.
2 U.S. airlines have announced they are canceling flights starting next week, citing sagging demand in the wake of the outbreak. The World Health Organization says it is meeting again Thursday to reconsider declaring a global health emergency because of evidence that human-to-human transmissions are now happening outside China. For Mariama Diallo, Amy Katz, VOA News. The World Health Organization is expected to decide Thursday whether to designate the coronavirus outbreak as a global health emergency. Some countries, however, are already taking action. New travel warnings are telling people to avoid non-essential travel to China. For the millions of people now under a lockdown in the outbreak zone, their immediate future remains uncertain. Now, the commander of the U.S. Africa Command, Army General Stephen Townsend, says the U.S. is currently dealing with China and Russia's influence on the continent, as well as confronting the al-Qaida terrorist group. General Townsend's comments came Thursday during his testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee amid reports that the U.S. plans to withdraw from Africa.
Africa is key terrain for competition with China and Russia, who are aggressively using economic and military means to expand their access and influence. I believe Africa offers America a competitive edge over China and Russia, and we should take advantage of it. We will grow more efficient to contribute to higher defense priorities and refocus resources to global power competition. But we cannot take pressure off major terrorist groups like al-Qaida and ISIS. These groups and many others remain an inconvenient reality in Africa. While we should not try to confront each one, we should remain resolute in confronting those who threaten Americans and the American homeland. Like al-Shabaab, the largest and most violent of al-Qaeda's branches. Today, AFRICOM does that with a light and relatively low-cost footprint.
The Senate Armed Services is reviewing the defense authorization request for 2021 and the future year's defense program. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, local officials and the civil society leaders say suspected Islamist militants killed at least 30 people overnight Tuesday. 4 villages were raided in eastern Congo by the Allied Democratic Forces, a Ugandan Islamist group operating in western Beni territory, which has seen a surge of violence since October 30th, when the army launched a large-scale offensive against the rebels. Local Administrator Richard Kivanzanga says that 32 people were killed in the attacks west of the city of Oicha. The United States imposed sanctions on the leader of the ADF and 5 others in December for committing serious human rights abuses, including mass rape, torture, and killings. The widow of a basketball superstar, Kobe Bryant, has issued her first public statement since the death of her husband and daughter in a helicopter crash on Sunday. In a message posted Wednesday on her Instagram social media account, Vanessa Bryant said she and her family are completely devastated over the loss of her husband and Gianna, the couple's 13-year-old daughter. The 2 of them were killed along with 7 others as they were flying to a basketball tournament at the Kobe Bryant Sports Academy outside Los Angeles. Vanessa Bryant announced the creation of a fund to help support the other families affected by the crash. The couple, who would have celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary in April, have 3 other daughters, the youngest born just last year. Kobe Bryant spent his entire 20-year playing career with the Los Angeles Lakers, winning 5 championships and becoming an international superstar before retiring in 2016. The Lakers postponed Tuesday's scheduled game against the Clippers, their in-town rival and co-occupant of the Staples Center, where Bryant played for much of his career and where fans have erected a makeshift memorial to honor him and Gianna. We'll have more on Kobe Bryant's legacy later in our broadcast. Asha Khalif Ali is battling to protect her children from the combined issues of climate change and conflict. Drought took her crops and animals, then violence killed her husband and brother. Sisipo Sikweya tells us more.
First, drought in Ethiopia's Oromia region destroyed Asha Khalif Ali's crops and animals. Then, ethnic violence that sprouted in the arid landscape killed her husband and brother.
Because of the drought, even before the conflict happened and we got displaced, we used to have 1 meal a day. Only 1 meal.
Scientists say Asha's story of a once prosperous family buffeted by the intertwined plagues of climate change and violence will become more common around the world as repeated disasters fuel conflicts over ever scarcer resources. After gunmen from a rival group killed Asha's husband, she fled into the mountains with her children. They marched for 5 days, her children's feet bleeding, her milk drying up. When they reached a safe village, she and her 4 children were hospitalized. Peter Mora, president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, says more and more people are recognizing the link between violence and climate change.
They make the relation that the shrinking livelihoods, the struggle over less productive land is at the origin of much of what they suffer after a couple of years of experiencing drought, for instance. Then they experience violence.
According to one monitoring center, Ethiopia had the highest number of new internally displaced people in 2018. Some fleeing droughts or floods, other clashes. Climate change is not the only cause for the interethnic conflicts, which have flared amid political reforms under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. The World Meteorological Organization says more extreme weather events can be expected if carbon dioxide emissions keep rising at the current rate. And the United Nations says the world needs to prepare for millions more climate change refugees.
Sisi Posikoyea of Reuters with that report. Now, Kenyans are discussing the recently launched Building Bridges initiative, a report intended to address cyclical election violence and unite citizens. Aden Duale, the majority leader of Kenya's National Assembly and member of the ruling coalition Jubilee, spoke with Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori about the security and issues of priority for citizens.
Do you personally see a problem and a conflict where government officials and the senior government people engage too seriously in business while they're serving the government? Do you see a conflict of interest?
It is completely a conflict of interest. The conflict of interest bill should be delivered to Parliament from the Attorney General next month when we resume. Yeah. Even there's a conflict of interest for a member of Parliament to be in the legislature and to go and defend corrupt individual in court, for example, governors. So the earlier the better that we bring and implement that piece of legislation, that you either choose to be in government, or you choose to be in the private sector, or you choose to be in the legislature, or you choose to be in the judiciary.
I want to ask you how the situation is with security in Kenya, so that the Minister Matiang'i has said that they're starting a kind of a new system now, a new regimen of security measures. What's going on? I mean, the country has been under attack for a long time.
No, I think the last few months, there were a number of attacks both in coast region and north part of Kenya. Government have realized that they need to have a new strategy in the war against al-Shabaab, in number of areas, involvement of community, because a number of the insurgents elements are people who have been recruited from the locality earlier, so there's ingrown
why has it taken such a long time to think of a new strategy? Because these attacks didn't start yesterday, and the al-Shabaab has been constant in their attacks. I mean, what changed? What did the government not know?
No. I mean, still, what brought the change was al-Shabaab have also, as a guerrilla organization, have changed their tactic. They use IEDs. They do local recruitment. So the change of strategy was that it's good to have special forces trained for this kind of warfare, different from the normal police officers who are in the region. Two is to make sure that our military, our defense forces, apart from their engagement in Somalia, also monitor the border excursion. Third is to make sure that we create a community policing in all the villages, where the community is on board and they can document for who is under al-Shabaab and who is not. So the nature of terrorism calls for change of strategy.
Yeah. Now, some have actually said, why not pull back the forces that are in Somalia, and instead you let them take care of the people at home instead of stretching all those resources for no good reason?
I mean, I think it's more safer to work with partners and Somali government to destroy the infrastructure of al-Shabaab. If we pulled out of Somalia, including Kismayu, al-Shabaab will take over Kismayu. They'll have constant...
Aden Duale, majority leader in Kenya's parliament, will be back.
Controlling that country, neighboring Kenya.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. Due to an expensive housing market, it's becoming more and more difficult for young Australians to move out of the family home. But sometimes that home is too small for them to stay. One solution being given a trial run in Tasmania is a backyard pod. 40 pods are being offered to the occupants of public housing properties as part of a Tasmanian government program. It takes about 6 weeks and $91,000 to $112,000 for one pod to be ready. Electricity and water are supplied through a connection to the main house. Next up, the Bride Abu Dhabi Wedding Show is a chance for brides in the region to get ideas for their big day. It showcases the key items they're likely to buy, from bridal gowns and evening wear to jewelry. 80% of visitors are Emirati women, and the event caters to local conservative tastes. Wedding celebrations often come with sky-high budgets, but the region's economic downturn is putting a dent in bridal spending. The Wedding Expo will move to Dubai in February. And finally, McDonald's is adding chicken sandwiches to its breakfast menu at all of its U.S. restaurants. The latest breakfast additions to the menu are Chicken McGriddles and McChicken biscuit sandwiches. They're available at participating restaurants for a limited time while supplies last. Breakfast has been an important sales driver for fast food chains, and as more rivals move into the space with new products, the pressure to retain customers has become more intense. Earlier this month, McDonald's expanded its Beyond Meat vegan burger trials in Canada, catering to the growing demand for plant-based proteins in fast food restaurants. And that's what's trending today.
In other world news, the U.S. Senate is expected to vote Friday on whether to call witnesses to testify in the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump. If they vote yes, it means that next week, Trump will deliver his annual State of the Union speech while being tried for his removal from office. Two American presidents have delivered State of the Unions under threat of impeachment: Democrat Bill Clinton and Republican Richard Nixon. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has more.
The President of the United States!
Trump may become the third president in American history to deliver his State of the Union speech under the threat of removal from office, following Bill Clinton in 1999.
Let us lift our eyes as one nation, and from the mountaintop of this American century, look ahead to the next one, asking God's blessing on our endeavors and on our beloved country.
And Richard Nixon in 1974. Facing impeachment from the Watergate scandal, Nixon used part of his speech to defend himself.
I believe the time has come to bring that investigation and the other investigations of this matter to an end. 1 year of Watergate is enough.
While Clinton took a different approach.
It was a very optimistic, upbeat speech about how good conditions in the United States were, how powerful the American economy was, and how many jobs had been created and what economic recovery had been done, but completely ignored the impeachment issue.
The February 5th speech is particularly important to Trump ahead of the November election.
The economy is roaring along. Unemployment has been extremely low. In fact, the unemployment rate for African Americans and Hispanics has hit record lows. I mean, those are the kind of achievements that I think a president would want to talk about no matter what else is going on in Congress, including impeachment.
Clinton was acquitted while Nixon resigned before he was impeached. Analysts expect Trump's approach to be a mix of his predecessors.
He will probably extol the achievements of his administration, particularly on the economy, but he will also probably mention impeachment and probably attack quite strongly the Democrats for their policy on that.
If his rallies are any indication, whatever happens in his impeachment trial, Trump will likely continue to project optimism.
This November, we are going to win back the House. We are going to hold the Senate, and we are going to keep the White House.
Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
As we mentioned earlier in our broadcast, the death of Kobe Bryant and daughter Gianna in a Calabasas, California helicopter crash triggered global shockwaves, especially in Africa, where many looked up to him. VOA spoke with fans in Kenya and a basketball official in Ivory Coast about the NBA star's sudden death. Here's VOA's Salem Solomon.
Although Kobe Bryant made his name playing basketball in America, where he spent his career playing for the NBA team Los Angeles Lakers, he was a global icon. And the impact of Bryant's death in a helicopter crash in Los Angeles County on Sunday reverberated around the world, especially in Africa, where Bryant helped grow basketball's popularity.
He is a legend in our sport. His kindness and openness were also well known among us in African basketball. It is difficult for all of us. On behalf of myself and African basketball, I want to express my deepest condolences to his family, to U.S. basketball and world basketball. For us Africans, we can say a legend is gone, a major loss.
And although he was celebrated as a 5-time NBA champion and 18-time NBA All-Star, some remember Bryant's relationship with his daughter.
After he retired, he didn't come to many NBA games. His daughter, Gigi, was the one who tried to kind of bring him back to start watching the game. I remember this interview I had done with, its name is Jimmy Kimmel. So, you know, there are these fans trying to ask him, yo, Kobe, why don't you and Vanessa try and have a boy so that he can carry out the legacy? And then his daughter was like, yo, I got this. She was just 13 years old, but actually she was the one following the footsteps of the dad.
Bryant was a basketball icon among young people in Africa, where the sport's popularity has soared over the past 2 decades. In 2010, while attending the FIFA World Cup in South Africa, Bryant visited the township Soweto. There, he spoke with young people about his love for soccer and how sports can help lift athletes out of poverty. The impact of his death runs deep for fans and players.
With Kobe, it actually felt like I've lost a family member, because the reason why I picked up a basketball in the first place was because of Kobe.
He had his own team, and he was making changes in this world. So having someone like him die, it's really bad and tragic. But death doesn't choose anyone, and so we celebrate the little things he did for us and be happy as far as we've come with him, right?
For some, accepting Bryant's loss will take more time. With Amos Wangawa and Nicolas Pinot, Salem Solomon, VOA News.
Turning to business now, farmers in Madagascar's Itase province are harvesting a specialist coffee enhanced by bat spits in what may be the first time such coffee has been commercially produced in Africa. David Doyle reports.
In the rich volcanic soil of Madagascar's Itase province grows a coffee that's coveted by bats and humans alike. But for farmer Narina Malala Ravaona Sol, the fact that the winged mammals come to nibble on the beans is not a nuisance. Bat spit makes this already expensive coffee even more valuable.
We can live off coffee today. Before, it was of no interest to the inhabitants of Itase, but now we can make a living. If production continues to grow, we can harvest more and more tons.
Farmers around the world are turning to premium and rare beans to shore up their incomes amid a global glut in more run-of-the-mill coffee that has driven down prices. Here they grow Bourbon Pointu beans, which sell for $101 per pound, more than 50 times the price of commodity-grade coffee. But when wild bats chew on the beans, a reaction between their digestive fluids and the outside air results in coffee with a uniquely smooth flavour, according to customers. And that sends the price even higher. Animal involvement in coffee production is not new. Southeast Asia's Kopi Luwak coffee comes from beans salvaged from civet cat excrement. Thailand has elephant dung coffee, and there's a Costa Rican bat coffee. But this may be the first time such coffee is being commercially produced in Africa, according to one specialist buyer. It's the brainchild of farmer Jacques Ramallah. 2 years ago, he introduced the beans to the area, and after seeing bats nibbling on them, he now wants to focus on the premium product.
Next year, we will ask farmers to focus only on the coffee chewed by bats. This means the farmers will harvest only the mature seeds, and that will improve the quality of our harvest.
The global specialty coffee market is forecast to hit $83.6 billion in 2025, more than double its 2018 size, and Ramallah wants to meet that demand. His farmers produced 2 tons of coffee this year, but plan to reach 20 tons by 2021.
Wonder how that coffee is going to taste like. I'm used to the farm to the mug coffee. Anyway, David Doyle, thank you for that report. David Doyle of Reuters. And that wraps up our show for today. We invite you to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. We're thankful for all the comments we watch on Facebook, YouTube. We're so happy to see them. Keep them coming. And from all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.